left him open at the foul line, which, I mean, when you're talking medium-range jump shots, the one you don't want to give up is basically a free throw. And that's the one he got, and he knocked him down one after another. It was really a fine performance from him. I hope he can keep playing 41 minutes, though. That's a pretty big load for him.
The other guy that was nice last night, Malcolm Brogdon only played 5 minutes before he exited with a hamstring injury. Skylar Mays came off the bench and had a double-double, Godfather, hit some big shots late and was aggressive off the bounce, 18 points, 11 assists, and had a couple of steals. He also made a couple of mistakes that we'll get to, but when you can bring a guy like that off the bench who can be that ultra-productive with one of your best vets out, I thought that was nice. He showed me some flashes last night. We've talked to him. His demeanor, his confidence, he's got some experience. I like him.
Yeah, for sure, Chad. He does have some experience. He's played NBA basketball. He's not like those other rookies, but he has confidence too, and that's what impresses me. He's not afraid to be out there at an end of a game. He's not afraid to try to make a play. He will shoot the open shot. He will take it to the basket once in a while. And even though last night was not a productive night for him in terms of what happened in the last minute or so, you still have to admire the fact that he comes in off the bench in a tough spot and contributes and really was a solid player for them through most of the game.
All right. The issue I had with the game last night was this is one that Portland had in hand in the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
And they're in a position to win the game. And then the final 2 minutes of the game, especially the last minute, was a complete disaster. So they're up by 5, Godfather, in a position to really take control. 109-104 after a bucket from Ayton. And then Shaedon Sharpe commits a foul on Malik Monk, who was behind the three-point line. It was a bad foul.
Yeah.
And so he goes to the line, makes all 3, and cuts the lead to 2. After that, we also had a turnover on Shaedon Sharpe. We had a missed layup that was highly contested from Skylar Mays. We got a turnover out of bounds off of Jeremy Grant. And then we also got the foul from Shaedon Sharpe, which ended up putting a guy on the foul line to tie the game. And then with 8.3 seconds on the clock, we got a hoisted 3 from Skylar Mays. Not the best shot you would hope for in that situation. So, again, this is part of being a young team is how you close out games. But I thought in the final couple of minutes, multiple guys, whether it be Grant or it's Mays or it's Sharpe, making mistakes that ended up costing them big time.
Yeah, I agree, Chad. Yeah, it's an interesting problem for them, though, because that foul that you mentioned with Shaedon Sharpe, that was his 6th. So the guy who's emerging as your guy down the stretch of a game is gone.
Yeah.
He's gone. And then the guy that you figure probably has the best chance of making a shot for you is Grant, but he's not a guard. He's a forward. He's not, you need somebody to get him the ball.
Yeah.
I think you'd kind of hope to get it to him off the inbound pass, but they couldn't. Instead, they got the ball to Mays, who and I was a little disappointed. They had 8 seconds. That's plenty of time to run something, to get, a pick and roll even. And they basically, he just took the ball to the top circle and dribbled it down and took a shot that didn't go in. And I'd like to think you could do better than that. And I would look for a little more structure from the coaching staff in a situation like that where you could – and I think maybe he wasn't supposed to be the guy who got the ball off the inbounds, but they covered Grant, and here you are in this situation. But, Brogdon's not on the floor. He's a go-to guy. And then Shaedon Sharpe, you're a guy who you would depend to take. You want him to take that shot just for the experience of taking it.
Yeah.
For down the road, he's accustomed to that, and he's not there. So that was unfortunate.
So in the final 8.3, you don't put that on Mays. You put that on the coach for not drawing up a scheme to get someone open and get a better look than a hoisted 3 from Mays.
Yeah. Or the other thing is Mays could take the ball to the basket and maybe get fouled, but he took the ball to the basket, previously to that, and took it into traffic and didn't get a foul call and didn't get a bucket. So I can see reluctance there too. So, worked out the way it was. But Chad, this is the kind of improvement we're looking for. We're not looking for them to win that game, and they made a heck of a run at winning it. They should have won it, probably, with the lead they had going into the final minute or two. But they didn't. But that's okay. The wins and losses, we're not counting those right now because they're not going anywhere anyway. So improvement. I saw improvement. Pleased to see them putting their defense together again in certain spots. They had to play with some pretty tough lineups there for short stretches where they were using guys who basically had hardly played all season, but they didn't have any choice because they're so beat up and hurt. They had to use these guys, but then that leaves the regular guys trying to climb out of a hole that those bench guys left for them.
Yeah, near the end of overtime, too. Kamara played some aggressive defense last
Yeah.
night. His length is a real problem for a lot of guys. And I thought his length worked against him because he forced a very difficult floater from Malik Monk. But because of the trajectory on the shot, it hit back iron and bounced out to where they were able to get the
Yeah.
offensive rebound. And that gave them the final edge at the end of the game. But I
That
like
was a
what I
big
see
play.
from him. Yeah, big play. Yeah, it's good. They're still top 10 defense today in the NBA, which is amazing.
Yeah.
And we're seeing the effort. Like, they had a couple of breakdowns last night, but for the most part, we saw the effort and the hustle and the energy on defense. And
If
I
I'd
wanted to see how they would do against Sacramento in that department.
Yeah, if I'd have come in here at the start of the season and said, Chad, they're going to be a top 10 defensive team, you would have laughed me right out of here, wouldn't you?
I would have had you committed immediately.
Yeah, I would have had me committed. Yeah.
And Billups deserves credit for that.
He does. Yeah. And Roy Rogers, the defensive coordinator, so to speak.
And by the way, Kevin Calabro was on fire last night. He and Lamar were in rare form, having a great broadcast. Those two guys work really well
You're listening to the Rip City Drive with Dwight and Chad on 620 Rip City Radio. Brought to you by Lazy Boy. What's your strategy for comfort? Listen on your free iHeartRadio app for all your music, radio, and podcasts.
All right, Joe DeLeon, a football genius, going to join us coming up at 5:20. All right, Godfather, we're expected to hear something from the Big Ten either today or tomorrow, at least by the end of the week, in terms of what they're going to do with Michigan and this ongoing investigation into their sign stealing. And really what it comes down to is the rule breaking, which would be in-person scouting, uh, looking at your opponents and using technology to record signs so that you can decipher them and be able to use them to your own advantage.
Right.
Everyone steals signs. In fact, Michigan made sure that everyone was aware of the elaborate sign stealing schemes and the sharing of information amongst Big Ten teams this week. My guess would be they were doing that to basically show that, hey, this is not something that's unique to us, but this goes on everywhere, even if they weren't in person using electronic equipment. So what do you think is going to happen? How do you see this playing out? And I guess more importantly, what would you like to see take place from the Big Ten?
Well, first of all, their sign stealing rules are really similar to baseball's. Steal all the signs you want. Just do it without the technology. And I think that's the real thing. And the in-person thing is they made that rule a long time ago. But what I think needs to be done, Chad, there has to be some sort of negotiation here. And I think the Big Ten commissioner has got to be close to Michigan and Harbaugh and work something out that's acceptable to everyone, because it looks now like the evidence is heavy towards doing something to Harbaugh. Well, he served a 3-game suspension earlier this year where he wasn't allowed to be on the sidelines with his team. So I would guess if you could, as commissioner, go to Michigan and to Mr. Harbaugh and say, how about if we give you a 2-game suspension? Then you'd be back for the Ohio State game and any postseason playoffs you get involved in. And that will guarantee that's all we're going to do. Now, the NCAA down the road somewhere is going to do something more, but that's not us. This is what we'll do as a conference, and it would probably be wise for you to accept that, because we could fine you a lot of money. We could suspend you longer than that, but this is the offer we're making. And I think the school would be crazy to turn that down at this point because of the outcry and the really crazy kind of momentum that this is carrying among the other schools in the conference. They want something done here. And I think that you have to placate them in some manner, I think, by suspending him. So I think that's the easiest way to do it without really hurting Michigan's program and its players too much.
You know, if there's wrongdoing or if people have gone against the rules to obtain signs with electronic equipment, then absolutely there should be some form of punishment. You mentioned it with this pressure that's mounting from the other schools in the Big Ten. What I don't want to see happen is this mob mentality take place where the commissioner feels like he has to do something to placate these people. Again, these are teams competing against Michigan, and a lot of them don't like Michigan, and they might dislike Jim Harbaugh to a certain degree. I just want the process to play out properly. I don't want mob rule to dictate how this is going to play out. So I'm hoping that the Big Ten commissioner shows some good judgment throughout this entire process. I'm hoping that's how it takes place.
So, Chad, are you okay then with Michigan? You know, let's say the facts play out and Michigan's guilty of doing what they've been accused of.
Yeah.
Are you okay with 3 years from now when Harbaugh's gone, all these players are gone, AD's probably gone, then penalizing Michigan for what this was?
Well, that's the way it's always been done.
Yeah.
That's the way the NCAA has always handled matters. So, there are two big issues for me that I want to see solved through this process, because I think this is a perfect example of how infantile the NCAA really is.
Hmm.
Because they're slow to act and they don't really have any real power, this is part of the problem and what's creating this mob rule, right? This push, because they know these other schools that the NCAA investigation is not going to wrap up for quite some time.
Right.
And they want action taken right now, probably because Michigan's unbeaten, arguably the best team in the country, and they're going to win the conference again. So there's some jealousy there that's at play. What I'm hoping comes from this is two things. One, that they just solve the issues like we saw in Major League Baseball and the NFL by getting freaking speakers in the helmets so you can relay directly to the quarterback.
No doubt, Chad. That's got to be done.
I don't
No
want to hear
question.
about money this, money that. Just get the issue done, all right?
Yeah.
I know that different conferences use different helmets or whatever. You can figure this out to where you can have a level playing field so everyone can communicate directly to their quarterback in their helmet so you're not having all this sign stealing going on. It's a pretty easy fix, right?
Yeah.
Didn't baseball solve the issue too because now you can communicate directly to your catcher?
Yeah, they have what's called pitch comm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, get quarterback comm into college football, and you'll solve the issue. I think the other big thing, and this is going to happen, and I hate the NCAA. I think it's a pathetic organization that's been operating on some lie for quite some time and been really just taking advantage of student athletes for years.
Yeah.
And a bunch of idiots are lining their fat-ass pockets with a bunch of money. But that's neither here nor there. What we need is a true commissioner of college football. And I think we'll eventually get this with playoff expansion and these conferences who are now forming super conferences. What you need is a commissioner who can be the guy to have rule over big-time college football. And then that way, when things happen and you have allegations, you can have a more swift process of investigation.
Yeah.
So in the end, action is taken, things are handled in a rapid manner, and you don't have things play out like this with the NCAA. Because you're right. Penalizing the kids right now at Michigan because of something that their coaches have done, that's not right.
No, it's
and
not.
I hated it before when a coach would have no rule over his program. He would leave and get a job elsewhere, and the school is left with the penalties. You get the death penalty, and then it takes 3 or 4 years to dig out of that, and it takes forever to recover when the acting party's already out of there. That's crazy to me. So I'm hoping that we get the speakers in the helmets so you can communicate directly to end the sign stealing, and then more importantly, eventually have a college football commissioner who can be in charge and be able to handle things in a speedily manner with intelligence, unlike we've seen from the NCAA for years. They've been doing this for years. It's crazy.
Let me ask you this question, though. And I've thought about this for a while. I'm shocked that somebody hasn't been able to intercept those signals in the helmets from the sidelines. I mean, people are stealing everything on the internet. All of these pay-per-view fights and wrestling matches and movies, basketball games, they're going out there and finding pirate streams, and somebody is stealing those out of thin air. I don't know how. I'm surprised somebody hasn't figured out a way to intercept those signals from the sideline to the quarterbacks.
My guess is they have.
Do you think?
I really do. I think if they haven't figured it out already, there's someone hard at work trying to figure out how to intercept those signals.
It can't be that difficult, right? I mean, I can listen to police calls. They have police radios you buy now. You can get all those frequencies.
Yes.
Somebody's going to stumble onto that frequency at some point.
There's no question. The one thing I've learned as I've gotten older is that people are always looking for an edge.
You become a cynic is what you're saying.
Well, what I've learned is the human heart is not good. Humans left to their own devices will always choose the wrong path, and they're going to do whatever they can to get an edge on you because in the big world of college football or government politics, there's too much money involved, and there's too much at stake for people not to want to find a way to get over.
Yeah.
So, yes, there is someone right now trying to figure out how to intercept those radio signals going into the helmet. And if those were in college football right now, Jim Harbaugh would hire someone to try and figure out how to intercept that material. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Bill Belichick, you don't think he's thought about ways that you could intercept signals or had a conversation with someone that he knows that's like a genius in that area? How can we intercept that? Of course they have, because that's what people do. That's why it drives me crazy, because I just think scandal, it takes place everywhere, especially in the highest levels where there's a lot of power and a lot of money. There's a lot of dirty stuff going on, underhanded stuff. But I think with college football, get a commissioner for the love of all that is right.
Yeah.
Let him be the ruler to be able to help administer justice.
The judge and jury.
Yes, just like we have in the NFL. Everyone
Mhm.
hates on Roger Goodell, but I'll tell you what, he acts quickly in most cases.
Mhm.
He gets things done and they move on. I don't always agree with his decision making, but at least things get handled fairly rapidly.
Well, the commissioners in all pro sports, I mean, the next day, usually you've got a ruling. You're
Yeah.
suspended. You're sitting down for a week. You have the right to appeal it
Yep.
in most cases, but you get a decision instantly. And that's what college football needs.
Yeah, and going back to your thought about the negotiations that are ongoing right now between Michigan and Harbaugh and the Big Ten, but those negotiations I think are important because if the commissioner comes out and he's too heavy-handed in the punishment, you know what Michigan's going to do. They're going to
Got to take
get
you
an
to court.
injunction and they're going to tie it up in the legal process, and then nothing's going to get done before the end of the season.
Yeah, and they'll have to spend a whole bunch of money doing it too.
Now, these people that are all about purity and the integrity of sport and all this nonsense, they want something done now. I can just tell you right now that something may happen, but it's not going to be what you want. Michigan's going to play in the playoff. They're going to be in a position to win a national championship, and more than likely, Jim Harbaugh will be on the sideline at least come playoff time. That's my guess. But if they reach an agreement, hey, I'll sit out the next 2 games. I'll even sit out the Ohio State game, and then he comes back for the playoff. That's possible.
Yeah. In all of Harbaugh's rhetoric about this, I haven't really seen him deny that this didn't take place. He's denying he knew about it.
Yeah.
And then the latest statement from Michigan is, well, everybody's doing it. Well, I thought we left that behind in 4th grade. Yeah. Jimmy hit me. Well, everybody gets hit. Come on. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. So the interesting part, too, there are some thoughts out there and reports that the information may have originally leaked from someone inside the Michigan building.
Now you really have a problem at Michigan, right?
Yeah, because you watch what happens. Right now, Michigan is there's some solidarity there in terms of everyone's on the same page, right? How much will that change if they lose to Penn State this weekend? Or if they lose to Penn State and Ohio State, or if they beat Penn State and then lose to Ohio State, how much support will Harbaugh lose in the building if that takes place? Because the biggest thing they're trying to preserve right now is not the integrity of sport. Michigan is trying to protect their chances to win a national championship.
Yeah, they're protecting their playoff berth. That's what it's all about, really.
And you know how it is in college football or college basketball. If you go out and win a national championship and the NCAA comes in later and strips you of that national championship, everyone still knows who the national champion is. The NCAA may not recognize you, but we all recognize them as the national champ, period.
Yeah, for me, once you've celebrated after winning a championship,
You're the champion.
you're the champion, get the ring, it's over. It's over. They can do whatever they want after that. You won it. You celebrated winning it. You got the ring. You got the T-shirt and the hat. That's it. It's over.
I also believe right now there are schools who are seeing what's happening to Michigan, and they're just praying that they don't get outed for their efforts too. Do you think, let me ask you a question, do you think Michigan is the only school that's sending in-person scouts to record signs with electronic
No,
equipment?
Of course not.
Yeah.
No.
So these other schools are like, oh, crap, we got to button up our operation. Everyone's got a Connor Stallions. Now
Well,
they just got to figure out how to hide that guy.
Well, when I first heard about the whole thing, I thought, how could you ever enforce that? That was, and then they came out with evidence of him buying the tickets and all the stuff they came out. But I thought, yeah, well, you can say he did that, but how in the heck are you ever going to prove it?
Yeah. It's kind
Because
of like,
it's so easy to do.
yeah, it's kind of like the SEC too, where, you know, for years they were all paying players big money to play in their conference, right? Long before NIL came around.
Mm-hmm.
No one was real quick to point the finger at anyone else. It was kind of an unwritten rule. It's like, okay, this is how we're going to do business in the SEC. We'll stay out of your way to a degree if you stay out of our way in a
Yeah.
degree, and then that way we can all get business done the way we want.
Right.
That's how it was operating down there.
Yeah, for years.
Years.
Everywhere, not just down there either. I remember, Chad, when I was covering a lot of college sports, one of my fun things to do was walk by the players' parking lot.
Yeah, and see what they're
Before
driving.
or after a game. These kids were all driving better cars than I was.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we'll see how that plays out. That's one of the things I like about the NIL right now is that it has leveled the playing field to a degree because now the SEC would step in before and they would recruit all the good quarterbacks, all these good players, right? Well, now these other schools have access to be able to pay legitimately,
Yeah.
so they can step in and offer starting jobs and an opportunity to some of these guys at other schools where the opportunity would not have been prior. So it's now getting to the point where you see these conferences, like this year, for example, in the Pac-12. Why is the Pac-12 so good this year, Godfather?
Quarterbacks.
Exactly. You look at the SEC, I don't really see a lot of notable quarterbacks in the conference, and that's because a lot of the guys are now in the Pac-12 because opportunity opened up with NIL for these guys to stay there.
Don't you think, though, in the future it's going to be a real auction? I mean, the SEC is not going to sit there and be outspent. They're going to be coming up with more money. I mean, you heard the coaches. Saban already is talking about that. You got to step up. All these coaches are saying that.
Yeah.
Guy at Kentucky said that. They're all saying that.
Yeah, so it's funny. A lot of people freaked out about the NIL, but in some ways it has leveled the playing field to a degree.
Well, it's made college football better because now you're keeping a lot of the good players.
Yeah.
And look at this conference between Penix and Nix. It's keeping them around another year because they can make almost as much money playing that last year of college football as they can as an NFL rookie.
That's true. You know what's weird for me? Like, I'm one of those guys where I don't dislike Jim Harbaugh. I like him, and I think he's a phenomenal football coach.
That's because you haven't had any dealings with him, probably.
That's right. I haven't had to deal with him, but I like Jim Harbaugh.
Yeah.
I know he's dirty, and I know he'll do whatever it takes to win because he's crazy like that. But I respect his abilities as a coach because if you look at everywhere he's gone, San Diego, Stanford, the 49ers, Michigan, the results, he wins.
Yeah.
He turns programs around, and he wins, and his teams are always mentally and physically tough.
And Chad, you expect them all to be dirty anyway. So why would you be deterred by a guy who's dirty? Because you think they all are, right?
I do.
Yeah.
I do the same thing when it comes to performance-enhancing drugs. I just assume
I get it.
that everyone's using and every team is cheating. So when it happens, I'm not like, oh, I can't believe that they would do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I'm more cynical now. You get older and you realize, like, oh, people are dishonest. People will cheat to win at every turn.
Yeah, duh.
Oh, politicians on both sides, no matter what the party is, are all crazy and they lie.
Yeah.
All the time.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it drives me crazy that politicians, they're so tied into their parties that they can't think freely for themselves. It drives me insane.
Well, they're so restricted by the people they're taking money from.
Yes.
That's the real problem.
Oh. All right, here's your college football viewing guide. It's another great weekend. And look, for you married men out there, or if you have a significant other, you need to get to work right now to come up with a plan. 9 a.m. Saturday on Fox, Godfather. Number 3, Michigan at number 10, Penn State. This is going to be a big-time game. Right now, Michigan's favored by 4.5.
I take the Wolverines all day in that game.
At 9 o'clock on ESPN, number 8, Alabama travels to Kentucky. The Wildcats 6-3 on the year. Alabama right now is cruising and getting better week by week after the loss to Texas. At 11 o'clock on the Pac-12 network, number 21, Arizona, which is now ranked, is at Colorado. So the Wildcats, we'll see if they continue to win, and they have an outside chance of factoring into the Pac-12 race based on how things play out, but they're playing good football. After that, 12:30 on ABC, big game for Duck fans and anyone else paying attention to the playoff. Miami is at number 4, Florida State. And there aren't too many games like this on Florida State's schedule where, look, I know the Seminoles are favored by 14, but this is a game against a legitimate opponent.
Yeah, there's a chance.
It would be helpful for the Pac-12 to just get Florida State out of the mix, and a loss would do that.
Come on, Mario. Do the Ducks a solid here.
12:30 on Fox, number 18, Utah at number 5, Washington. Huskies are a 9.5-point favorite. I expect Washington to win, but you screw around against Utah, and they will punk you.
Yeah, be careful, because you're not going to get away with the kind of mistakes that you made against USC and still beat Utah, because they're not going to make too many mistakes.
And then at 2:30 on the Pac-12 network, Stanford is at Oregon State. The Beavs, 20.5-point favorite at home against Stanford. It's pretty good.
That's Pac-12 network game.
Yes.
Is that what you said? Okay.
ESPN at 4, number 9, Ole Miss at number 2, Georgia. That's a big-time matchup. The Bulldogs favored by 10.5. And then later in the day, 7:30 on Fox, USC at Oregon. The Ducks are number 6 right now in the playoff rankings. They're favored by 15 points. So basically we have games from 9 a.m. all the way up until 7:30 at night with the kickoff of the Ducks and Trojans. So it looks like I know what I'm going to be doing again on Saturday.
I was just going to say, gosh, It's a good thing I don't do any chores around the house, Chad.
I'm telling you, we are the envy of most guys because I can look someone in the eye squarely and say, honey, I'm sorry, but I have to watch these games because I'm going to be talking about them on Monday. And you wouldn't expect me to go in and try to do the best job I can if I didn't watch the game and talk about it. I can't do that.
Chad, as you well know, I had to haul that excuse out of my pocket last Saturday. No, it was actually Sunday. After a full day of college football Saturday, I'm doing the full day starting at 6:30 a.m.
Chiefs, Dolphins.
Watching the NFL. And my wife says to me as kindly as possible, all day again? That's mind-numbing. And I didn't get a chance to ask her whether you meant my mind or her mind.
Yes.
Maybe both. I don't know.
Could be both. All right, when we come back, LeBron James, he just can't get out of the way of himself. This is a classic right here. I thought it was bad when he said, I'm chosen.
This is worse.
How many of you have considered creating your own museum while you're still alive? And we'll discuss next. When an NCAA champion and a WNBA star, Dee Richards, and Emmy-nominated sportscaster Chris Williamson, and a multimedia mogul, Terica Foster Brasby, join forces to form a big three, the conversations quickly catch fire. Each of them lets fly with their unique perspectives on the biggest stories across the NBA, WNBA, and college basketball. From courtside drama to slam dunk analysis, this talented trio is always wide open and most definitely dangerous. Get ready to go beyond the score lines and stats as they break down the game, bring you exclusive interviews, and offer insights that you won't find anywhere else. Whether you're a hardcore hoops fan or just getting into the game, 3 on 3 is your go-to source for all things basketball. Tune into this explosive trio every week on the iHeartRadio app.
The Rip City Drive, brought to you by Lazy Boy. What's your strategy for comfort? Here on 620 Rip City Radio. Listen on your free iHeartRadio app for all your music, radio, and podcasts.
All right, a couple of things. I've got a very special listener who is on Ticketmaster right now trying to get Taylor Swift tickets, and we had a bit of a hiccup. One of those classic moments where you make a big purchase on your credit card and you get the fraud alert.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so we'll see how it plays out. But, you know, this person's about to pull off one of the all-time rabbits out of the hat to make my daughter very happy. So we'll see how that plays out. Also, Miranda has chimed in. And you got to tell me if this is a legitimate criticism, but she says, "Dear Skunk Vomit, good afternoon, Mr. Doing. So your position is that if HelmetCom adds encryption, they, in quotations, will figure out how to break the encryption. My questions are, one, who is they? Two, when did you complete your studies of crypto security?" Nimrod. She called me a Nimrod.
I think it's the nicest thing she said to you in weeks, really.
But my whole thought process is that if Harbaugh can find a guy like Connor Stallions, who is from the Naval Academy, I'm assuming you can go to one of the academies and be able to find someone that specializes in encryption, right?
Oh, I don't
nothing
think that
for them.
Wouldn't be a problem at all. I don't know. Do you think those signals are encrypted? Because that costs money. I don't know if they're willing to spend that kind of money to get them encrypted.
It's a great question. It's a great question. I'll do a Google search on that. Are NFL signals into helmets encrypted?
Because it seems like the helmet then would have to have some sort of encryption software, and the helmet would be heavier than a player is by the time you put all that junk in there.
I'd be like, "Look, Coach, can you just shut up? Play some Hall & Oates, man. Put me in a good mood."
Right.
I would just have them pipe music into my helmet. I think that'd be pretty awesome. All right, I want to read this to you. This is a classic right here. I know that there will be some of you be like, "Chad, what's the problem? He's such a great person." This is a new one here. According to a new report, LeBron James' home court, a museum dedicated to James and his many milestones, will open in Akron on November 25th. A multimedia experience, the museum will include a recreation of the apartment where he and his mother, Gloria, lived, along with items from his childhood, high school playing career, and championship runs with Cleveland, Miami, and the LA Lakers. The museum is at House 330, a facility started by James Foundation to serve the community where he was raised. Quote, "My dream was always to put Akron on the map, so to have a place in my hometown that allows me to share my journey with my fans from all over the world means a lot to me. I've been known to hang on to a lot of things over the years, and I always knew there would be a time and a place to bring them out." Among the items on display will be the all-white suit James wore at the 2003 NBA draft, his jersey from the McDonald's All-American game, and an original backboard and rim from St. Vincent St. Mary High School, where James first caught the attention of basketball fans as a teenager. A four-time NBA champion, James, 38, is in his 21st season as a pro. Last year, he passed Kareem Abdul-Jabbar as the leading scorer in league history. This is a serious question, and I ask that you treat it seriously.
Go ahead. I doubt it.
Do we know of any person that has created a museum for themselves while they're still living?
No. I've been thinking about that, Chad. I knew I'd be asked that. And I can't think of anybody who created their own museum. Now, others have done it for people, but really, you're going to create your own museum?
Athletes have a museum. It's called the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously.
Send your stuff there, right?
If John Elway put out a press release that he was creating a museum where his fans could show up and celebrate his career with him, I'd be like, get out of here. That's ridiculous.
Really? You wouldn't even go to John Elway's museum?
No, because that I draw a line. You cannot create a museum for yourself. Someone else has to do that. Let me create the museum after you die.
Let me ask you this question. They named some items there that are going to be in the museum. Are any of those items worth taking a trip to Akron, Ohio to see? I don't care about his white suit that he wore at the draft. What, are you kidding me?
You couldn't pay me to go to Akron. Why? Why would I do that? Nothing like a large dose of humility.
I don't get it. I don't. Can you imagine the ego that it takes to start your own museum?
And this is an all-time for him.
Oh,
and this is
for
saying
him.
a lot. This is an all-timer right here.
Yeah. You know, someday you wait, 20 years from now, he's going to run for president. You wait, because he thinks he's that popular. Till somebody starts asking him questions about real things in the real time, and then he might have a problem. But
That's actually a fabulous question. What will he do or pursue? Because my read on him is that he's hungry for attention at all times. What will he pursue after his playing career?
He's not going to leave the limelight. I think he'll either act in Hollywood, try to become an actor, because he's already got the movie business thing going. He's a producer. So he'll try to get into some of those movies thinking he's an actor, especially if they need somebody to play a king. If they need somebody to play the role of a king, he's got it.
Hey, LeBron, we need you to play King Arthur. I'm in.
Got it.
I'm in.
No.
A museum for yourself. That's a new one for me.
Gosh. What?
That's what I've always respected most about LeBron. I thought it was his longevity in being able to play for 20 years at a high level. I was wrong. It's the humility in which he operates with. That's what I admire most about Bron.
I don't think that museum's going to be big enough for him to fit his ego into the front door.
Now, will they have pictures on the wall commemorating the decision with Jim Gray?
Oh, I'm sure. Well, they said all the milestones of his career. Okay.
Will they have pictures on the wall of when he quit on the Cavs in the postseason? Will that be on the wall?
I hope so.
You got to tell the whole story if you're going to do it the right way.
I think it'll be his story told his way.
Will they have a corner of the room dedicated to when he pretended to read a book about Malcolm X?
Yeah.
Gosh, what a joke. Don't be a fraud, man. Don't be a phony. He's a fraud. That's all. A museum for yourself. Hey-oh! Man, he loves him some LeBron, doesn't he?
He does. Nobody else does like
He
him.
loves him some LeBron. All right, we'll keep things rolling here on the show. Wow. That's LeBron James, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Wonderful. All right, when we come back, there's a real crappy football game on tonight.
Oh,
I don't know if I can make myself watch that. What's worse, this Thursday night football game or walking around the LeBron Museum?
I'd take the
Here's what you need to know.
From the Goldberg Jones Sports Desk, your 620 Rip City Radio headlines. Goldberg Jones. Call 1-800-DIVORCE.
All right, it's now 4 o'clock. Chad here. Your Portland Trailblazers took a tough overtime loss in Sacramento last night. Jeremy Grant, 38. Skylar Mays, a double-double after Malcolm Brogdon exited with a hamstring injury. They're back in action Sunday in L.A. against the Lakers. Tip at 7. I'll have game day at 4:30. Thursday night football on Prime tonight. 5:15 kick. The Bears and Panthers. Chicago favored by 3.5. Elsewhere, the Vikings and wideout Justin Jefferson are on the same page. Although there's a window returning to practice open this week, Jefferson won't play in a game until his injured right hammy is fully healed. College football coming up this weekend in the Pac-12. 12:30 on Fox. Utah at Washington. Huskies a 9.5-point favorite. Stanford at Oregon State. 2:30 on the Pac-12 Network. Beavs favored by 20.5. And at 7:30 on Fox, USC at Oregon Ducks, a 15-point favorite. We'll talk football with Joe DeLeon at 5:20.
The home of the OSAA is 620 Rip City Radio.
For an opportunity to unleash his legs and really do some damage. We'll get into that coming up in 20 minutes. We'll get to Thursday night football and why there's such a crappy game on the schedule here in a moment. But I want to go out to the phones. We were talking about LeBron James and the creation of his own museum in Akron, Ohio, which is bizarre. I don't know of any living individual that's created a museum for themselves, but Jim in Portland says he created his own museum. We got to go there right now. Hey, Jim, appreciate the phone call. Welcome to the Rip City Drive with Dwight and Chad. This is not real, right? Shacker's lying to me. You didn't actually create your own museum?
Well, of course I did. Chaz.
Okay.
Hi, Godfather.
Hi.
Why wouldn't I? Everybody should.
What's in it?
My rock and roll T-shirt collection that has all kinds of holes in them, but I've always hung on to those. My skateboard, Little League baseball mitt, my first soccer jerseys, baseball, football cards, my mechanical drawings from high school. Come on, who doesn't?
Well, how much would it cost
Report
me?
card
How
and my trombone.
How much would it cost me if I wanted to tour that museum?
Oh, $250.
You're cheap.
$250.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Well, Jim, I appreciate you creating your own museum, but, you know, I think that's a little bit different. We all have that. I've got things in my room where things from my past or things from my childhood, pictures and memories and different things up.
Mm-hmm.
That's different than creating an entire building to pay tribute to myself. That's a big difference, right?
So we're not going to see the Chad Doing Museum anytime soon?
No, but you know what's really crazy? In fact, I was watching an interview with Troy Aikman, and he was on video, and he was in his office. And there were no pictures in the office of his playing days with the Cowboys. And this guy is a 3-time Super Bowl champ and one of the best quarterbacks of all time. And the person who was talking to him said, no pictures, no jerseys, no Cowboys, no trophies, no nothing. He said, hey, that was a time in my life that I'm very thankful for, and it was great. But I'm always on to the next thing, looking to the future, because I want to continue to stay focused on the task at hand. And I heard that, and I thought, that's a good approach. And I think that's the way most athletes approach it.
Yeah.
They don't put a lot of stuff from their own playing days up on the walls to commemorate that time because they're on to the next thing. Most of those guys are so competitive and driven that they're not looking back into the past. That's what you get. And usually athletes that have something to pay tribute to their playing days is because their wife wanted to do it, right?
Yeah.
Not something that they were motivated to do themselves.
Yeah, I think sometimes guys do that for their kids, you know, their families and stuff so they can see it. And I think, you know, in some cases, gosh, if you've won a Heisman or if you've won a Super Bowl, if you can get some of that stuff out there, your friends want to see it.
Yeah.
And if they come over, they're going to ask to see it most likely. So I think it's good. But as I heard somebody say last night on I think was it the Country Music Awards last night? There's a reason that your rear view mirror is small and your windshield is big.
Mm-hmm.
What's important is what's ahead of you, not what's behind you.
Exactly. In fact, I think it was Joe Montana. I just heard him recently where he was going to auction off all of his stuff, right?
Really?
From his playing days, and I think give the money to charity
Mm-hmm.
because he doesn't care about that stuff anymore. But his kids were like, no, wait a second. Before you do that, let us come over. So he let his kids come over and kind of pick and choose some of the stuff they might want to remember their dad for.
Mm-hmm.
But for him, it just didn't matter.
Wow.
I think for the players, it's more about the memories that they have with the guys.
Yeah. It's more about the money, too.
Well, the money too, but
Yeah.
the memories where they can
Yeah.
get together with the guys and reminisce about the past and some different situations or whatever. But they're just not ones to hold on to trophies or trinkets or whatever, right? And that's pretty much the way it is.
Some of them do, though. You see those interviews on TV, and those guys are sitting in front of a wall of pictures, uniforms, trophies.
Yeah,
I've seen some of those guys do that.
not usually their own uniforms though. A lot of guys will get uniforms from players they respect.
Yeah.
They'll exchange jerseys or whatever, but I don't know, it's weird. Your own museum, that's an all-timer right there. You're going to go with your own museum. Okay. Interesting, LeBron. Very interesting. A great player, one of the all-time greats, but it's just the way he operates that drives me crazy. But the people that love him probably look at the museum and think, what a great idea that is.
Yeah. So nice of him to share that with us.
Isn't that so generous of LeBron to share his life and his journey with us? Why did I think of that before? I should do that. I should come up with the Chad Radio Hall of Fame when I'm done to pay tribute to myself so my tens of fans can come and share. They can share in my journey, my pathway.
I think they said, too, it's going to be a self-guided tour through there. So he's probably going to narrate the tour through there just to give you the full impact of some of this stuff. I mean, it'd be certainly fun to see a replica of his apartment that he grew up in. I mean, come on.
Well, you had a very good question when I came in today. You're like, why the heck are they having those two teams, Carolina and Chicago, on Thursday Night Football
Yeah.
tonight?
Very disappointing.
That's not really a must-see football game because it's going to be a very bad football game between two very bad teams that don't exactly play good football.
Yeah, they've won a combined 3 games between them.
Thrilling, very thrilling.
Yeah.
Well, what the NFL did for years up until this season, every team in the league was guaranteed at least one nationally televised football game. And so that meant whether it was Thursday or
Prime
Monday,
time game, right?
prime time.
Yeah.
So you get a primetime game. And so what they would do is they would cycle everyone through on Thursday Night Football. Well, I would imagine part of this change with Prime Video coming in, they wanted a little more control over having the ability to put better matchups on. So what the league owners voted on was the fact that now not every team is guaranteed a nationally televised game. And so what they did is they can open it up Thursday Night Football to teams being on there more than once. So that way you get better matchups, right? So this year there were 14 teams that were selected, and then there were 3 teams that were selected through a lottery. And so that's why you have Chicago and Carolina matched up in a Thursday Night Football game. That's why.
Can you imagine just 3 teams in the lottery and 2 of them got drawn out for this game? I have a feeling that somebody who was conducting the lottery, quote unquote, probably just pulled those 2 out and said, look, we got to have these teams on. If we put them on the same night, we won't get any ratings for that game, but we won't have to put up with them for the rest of the season.
So this year, just so you're aware with the scheduling in the NFL, there will be more flexibility in late afternoon games. For many years, AFC games have been on CBS and NFC games on Fox. For interconference game, the road team determines the network. But now networks with the late afternoon game can broadcast a game from either conference that will lead to better matchups in the late slot. There's going to be a Black Friday game the day after Thanksgiving for the first time. And another change, presumably to improve the quality of primetime games, is that not every NFL team will be guaranteed at least one primetime game per season anymore. That's presumably related to teams being allowed to appear on Thursday Night Football twice a season instead of being limited to once. The NFL owners voted to pass that back in March. For years, the NFL allowed each team a primetime game. That led to some bad matchups, many of which landed on Thursday Night Football. While predicting which teams will be good when the NFL sets the schedule in May is tough to do, the rule takes a big game away from the team that might not have many other highlights in its season. So there you go. That's what they're doing now. They're specifically trying to slot better matchups in these primetime slots, although you can't guarantee it. But one good way to do it is take a look at the quarterbacks, the playoff teams from the previous year, and now they've opened up Thursday Night Football to teams who can be on there more than once. That's probably a good way to do it, so that way you're hopefully going to get better matchups.
Yeah, and I think one thing to keep in mind too, Chad, is that teams really don't want to play the Thursday game, right?
Yeah, I would think not. Players don't.
Yeah.
Because you don't have time to recover. Not that a week is enough anyways, but definitely not a few days. I've always had a problem with the product because if you don't have as much time to prepare, guys are still beat up from the previous game on Sunday, you're playing on Thursday, that's going to lend itself to games that are a little more choppy or uneven.
Yeah, we've seen some really bad Thursday night games.
Yes. Now, with this said, Chicago and Carolina will probably go out and play a classic tonight.
Yeah, they might.
It might go into overtime. We might see some good quarterback play. I doubt it, but it's quite possible. But, I'm just like you, Godfather. I want the best matchups. I like good quarterbacks. I'll watch any game, but I prefer the teams with better quarterbacks and teams that are in contention for something. And that's what I like to see. Like right now, though, Houston's not a great team, but they're improving. But I want to watch them because C.J. Stroud's been unbelievable.
Yeah.
Those are the type of things I'm looking for. I like watching Philadelphia play because I like Jalen Hurts and the way that team operates with their unique offense and their ability to run the football. I watch the Chiefs because I'm fascinated by Patrick Mahomes and I might get a glimpse of Taylor Swift. I watch Bronco games because I'm a Bronco fan. I like watching, if I want defense, I'll tune into the Browns and Ravens this weekend because I know you're going to get a lot of defense there. I like watching the Lions right now because they're a great story and I like their coach and they're a team on the up and up. San Francisco and Jacksonville is going to be fascinating this weekend because the 49ers are under immense pressure to get a win and snap a 3-game slide. Jacksonville's on the up and up. Trevor Lawrence is great. I like the connection he's got with Doug Peterson. I like some of the young playmakers. They're opportunistic. So there's a lot of good things to tune into in the league this year. Carolina and Chicago are just not one of them. That's all.
Far from it.
But you're not going to tune in. Like Cleveland and Baltimore is not at the top of your list.
No, I don't like that game, Chad, because I don't like those. I mean, they're not only defensive teams, they're almost total defensive teams.
Like there's a high probability that game will be in the teens, 17-14.
Yeah, although Baltimore's really surprised me. Jackson's come on and they're scoring points now all of a sudden.
That's true.
But that surprised me.
Against the Browns defense. They're literally the top two defenses in the NFL. Browns,
1 and 2.
Ravens. It's pretty good. All right, we'll keep things rolling here on the show. When we come back, we're going to hear from a quarterback guru talking about Bo Nix, and we'll discuss some of his talents and maybe one talent that they haven't used enough of this year. I'm talking about his legs.
For this because you're looking at real film and you Josh Allen, darn.
It's Rip City Drive on 620 Rip City Radio. Brought to you by Lazy Boy. What's your strategy for comfort? Listen on your free iHeartRadio app for all your music, radio, and podcasts.
Well, I'll tell you what, Shacker's always full of surprises. You never know what you're going to get music-wise with Michael Shacker.
Yeah, it's sometimes really good, and sometimes, what the heck is that?
All right, telephone number 503-248-0620. Joe DeLeon, football genius, going to join us at 5:20. You can also hop on our YouTube stream. Go to youtube.com and pull up our homepage, Rip City Radio 620. And you'll see the live links right there. All of our shows now, each and every day, live on YouTube. Click and subscribe, and you can take part in the group chat and be a part of our show right here on YouTube. You can find Dwight on X at Dwight James. You'll find me there at Chad in Rip City. All right. Alex Brink's going to join us tomorrow, and Jordan Palmer, who is the brother of Carson Palmer, very similar in his work and what he does down in California. Like Alex Brink, he works with quarterbacks. So he's a quarterback guru, a quarterback coach, and one of my favorite things to do online now is to watch different guys, whether it's Brink or it's Palmer or this guy that's based out of Colorado, Tim Jenkins. I like watching quarterbacks, and Kurt Warner does a video series too, where they take the film from the previous week and they break down all these different quarterbacks. Well, that's how you really know what they're seeing, what they're doing, and what plays are good and which plays aren't, because they're breaking it down and telling you what they should be doing, what they're seeing. And like I watched this video today on C.J. Stroud, and I think it was from Dan Orlovsky, and just him highlighting a couple of details that he was able to pull out from what Stroud is recognizing at the line of scrimmage. It's high-level stuff. It's awesome. I love that with quarterback play. There's so much going on at the line of scrimmage before they even have the ball in their hands after the snap that they have to diagnose to make sure that they're in the right play, they're going to get to the right spot, where to put the football, what the hot read is, where the protection needs to be, where the free blitzer's coming from, all that. It's mind-blowing, all the information they have to consume in a very short period of time.
I don't know how they do it, honestly. It's just incredible to me that you could be programmed to do something that extensive. I'm in awe of that.
So am I. And all of that, sometimes 10 seconds after you just got crushed by a 300-pound lineman. You get sacked, they drive you into the ground, you're not exactly feeling 100%. You have to get back up and get in the huddle, focus on the play, and get ready to go. It's incredible. It's why it's the most difficult position in sports. Well, Palmer today was on Fox Sports Radio and was talking about Bo Nix. Take a listen to what he had to say.
I think one of Bo Nix's best attributes hasn't really showed up this year at Oregon. They don't run with him a lot, and they don't take 5 and a hitch from Gunn, where he's got to manipulate the pocket and bounce around and buy time because the ball's coming out. And those are two elements of his game that I think are going to be dynamic. He's an explosive runner. He'll be like a 4.5 guy at the combine.
Like Joe Burrow, move down the field, get yards?
No. He's faster than Joe. This is a really fast guy. And so like that, but we haven't seen that. You saw it at Auburn, but he ripped off some big runs at Auburn, but he, with the 52 start or whatever it's going to end up being, the most starts of anybody in college football history, we haven't seen two of his best elements because they've been scheming guys open. He's been playing winning football and getting the ball out of his hand.
Yeah. All right, there you go. There's Jordan Palmer talking about Bo Nix. How about that? The legs, which we saw a lot at Auburn, because of the offense he's in at Oregon, where the football is getting out of his hands quickly. They're not using him in the run game where they absolutely could, and it could do a lot of damage to defense. And I think we wanted to see more of this from Justin Herbert when he was at Oregon.
Yeah.
So do you think it's a similar situation where it's like, hey, we want you to come back, we want you to play quarterback for us, and to make sure that your NFL future is secure, we'll go out of our ways to scheme and make sure that you're protected. We won't put you in a lot of situations where you have to run and make you, an open target for a defender. You think that's part of what maybe is going on here with the offense?
Well, yeah, I think if you're the coach, the thing you want to do is protect him as much as you can. He's the franchise, no question about it. Yeah, you'd be a pretty good football team without him, but you're not the same if you lose him. And I think most of this is to protect him. I think as we move further down the season and these games increase in importance, you're going to see more of him running, just like we did with Herbert, who didn't run that whole final season till they got to the Rose Bowl. He's running for like 3 touchdowns. And it's like, okay, now we have nothing left to save him for. Go ahead and run it, see what happens. I had no idea, though, that Bo Nix was a 4 or 5 guy. That's churning right there.
Yeah, that's pretty good speed for a quarterback. And that's someone that can run away from some backers and safeties out there when you get in the open field, which is impressive. It reminds me of that big Stanford-Oregon game back in 2010 when the Ducks went undefeated and went to the national title game. Stanford at Oregon, the Cardinal got up big early before the Ducks made their comeback and got a big onside kick. But in that game, we hadn't seen it all year. All of a sudden, Chip Kelly was using Darren Thomas in specific quarterback runs with purpose, right?
Yeah.
So I think that maybe Oregon, they're doing a great job of scheming, and Bo Nix is getting the ball out of his hands and making good decisions. But you can always hold on to something.
Sure.
You've got it in your arsenal. You know it's going to work, but you wait and you don't show it until you get into a big-time matchup against a big-time team, probably come playoff time, and then you unleash it because it can give you a big advantage. And you know how it is. These teams are obsessed with looking at film and trying to pick up on tendencies. And if you show up in a game, all of a sudden you throw a bunch of stuff at them they haven't seen, you can catch teams off guard and gouge them for big plays. And Bo Nix is that type of player.
Yeah, he is. I mean, don't you think we saw him run more last season than he has this year? He ran a little bit last year.
Yeah. Yeah, I think they're trying to protect him. I really do. But if the stakes warrant him to open it up in the run game, I think he would do it.
Yeah, I do too.
Meaning, if you're playing Georgia or you're playing Michigan or take your pick in the playoff and you need to pick up a key play or you've got a play that you know is going to work for a touchdown, I think Bo Nix would be open to the idea. What you don't want is to have a guy running in every game in multiple situations to where you're opening him up to constant hits because you don't want the injury to take place.
Yeah, when you think back, he hasn't had to scramble much either. They protected him so well. We haven't seen him have to really run out of the pocket, get loose to throw the ball or pick up a first down. He's done it a little bit, but not to any extreme.
All right, so this game coming up on Saturday against USC. I would think, based on what the coaches have seen on film, that they've got to know with their offensive line and with their personnel, they can run the football at will on USC. In fact, I fully expect Oregon to have tremendous success on the ground. They're a great team in terms of balance. They can run the football with authority. We know what Bucky Irving can do when he gets into the open field. They're going to run the football, right?
Yeah, they have to.
But what I don't want to see is this. This game makes too much sense, right? And I hate it when offensive coordinators do this. We've seen Jonathan Smith and his staff do this at times. Why do coaches, when you go into games where it's pretty obvious how you should attack a defense, sometimes they get too cute or too creative, and they try to come up with things that are a little bit more of a reach than what is needed to get the job done. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do know what you're saying.
Why do they do that?
They just can't resist. I have no idea, but there's something in the makeup of play callers that they just have to do. They can't resist. You might be ripping off 20-yard gains every time you hand it to your running back. They're still going to mix in a couple passes for no apparent reason whatsoever.
What I want to know is how aware are they of Bo Nix stats and where he's at in relation to the Heisman race? Do coaches, staff, they take that into account, don't they?
They're watching it. Yeah, because it's good for their program. They want to win for Bo, but by the same token, that's real good for the Ducks to have a Heisman Trophy winner.
So can you find a balance where you do what is necessary, you do the right things to win, but at the same time,
try to take care of them?
Is it okay to try and take care of them within reason?
I think so, yeah. I think that's part of the charm of a program, too, is that you're willing to do these kinds of things for your athletes. Like if a guy's got 98 yards rushing, get him those last 2 yards. Or somebody's scoring a lot of touchdowns, get him one. Make sure he gets his touchdown. All those things, I think, create goodwill among your players and good morale. So, yeah, you got to try and do that. You're never going to sacrifice a game to do it, but you have to try to take care of these guys.
Well, this should be a game where Bo Nix is going to have opportunity because they're going to start running the football, and they'll have such great success. It should open up everything else in that offense for the Ducks.
Mm-hmm.
Look, I expect the Trojans to have some bump in terms of the coaching change on defense. A lot of those players are probably just happy that Alex Grinch is out of there, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
My guess is, without being a part of the USC staff, they've probably simplified things to the point where players can be a little more free to use their athleticism.
You know, the other thing you see sometimes too, Chad, is when you change,
Yeah.
there might be different guys out there because very often that coordinator falls in love with certain players and you got his assistants. Why doesn't he play Chad Doing once in a while? He's great in practice,
Yeah.
but he's got something against him or he doesn't like him or whatever. But those kids now, everybody on that defensive side is thinking, I got a new chance, new coordinator. I have new opportunity now. And some of them might get into the game.
This game will be interesting to watch because Bo Nix is probably going to have the better game because he's on the better team and better support in all phases. But this is why I respect Caleb Williams so much. He is under so much pressure to perform week in and week out based on what's around him with that team and the way they're constructed that I respect the process he has to go through. Because when he steps on the field on Saturday against the Ducks, you know what he's thinking. I have to be ultra productive. Our offense has to score points every time we get the ball. And the Ducks know that, and they're going to come after him. And I love to see guys have to work through that. It's just the circumstances he's in. He's under a lot of pressure to make plays every series.
Yeah.
Bo Nix knows that, hey, if we go 3 and out or someone fumbles the football, we're going to have another chance because our defense will give us opportunities. But Caleb Williams doesn't have that luxury. So he's under a lot of pressure to go out there and make it happen every time you have the football. And I don't care how good you are. It's nearly impossible to be flawless as an offense in a football game. You can't win like that.
Yeah, and I would also say, Chad, that if it's cold and windy and rainy, like it might be Saturday night, don't forget night game, that's a miserable night in Autzen Stadium. But the team that can run the ball is going to profit from that situation.
Yeah, now USC does have good balance in their offense, and they can run the football. So they're not like a one-dimensional attack. But I give Oregon's defense a better shot to contain the run to a degree to where they can put Caleb Williams behind the chains and have to make plays. Now, the tough part, I think the challenge for the Ducks will be their pass rushers, their stamina, because they're going to be rushing the passer a ton. And chasing around Caleb Williams is a serious problem. And the secondary's got to pay attention to their P's and Q's because his ability to buy time and continue to have his eyes downfield, you'd be amazed at how many guys can open up with, when you get an extra 2 or 3 seconds to get rid of the football because of his mobility. He is very elusive back there. But if it's a wet field, he does fumble a lot. 30 fumbles on the season, that leads the FBS. So if you get pressure on him, like any quarterback, he'll have some issues with that, but maybe you can swipe the ball because he'll hold on to it too long sometimes because he knows he's got to make a play.
Yeah, don't you think that I would worry more about the back end of the Ducks defensively?
Yeah, their front seven is legit.
Yeah, and they got depth there. They'll run guys in and out. And I think that will be fine. And they need pressure from those guys, no question about it. They got to get heat on him to give the guys in the secondary a chance. Otherwise, you're going to see a lot of pass interference calls because I think they coach him down there. If you get beat, just grab them because they get some pass interference calls.
Yeah, we can live with 15 yards.
Absolutely. It's the craziest penalty in football. You got a 70-yard pass play, and all you got to do is tackle the guy, and it's 15 yards instead of 70.
I would be coaching that all the time. Don't get beat deep. If so, grab the guy. Who cares?
Right.
I'd much rather give up a 15-yard penalty instead of a 70-yard touchdown.
Mm-hmm.
I think the other thing you coach in terms of the Ducks is, look, be patient. He's going to make plays on you, and it's going to get frustrating sometimes. They're going to score points. It's okay because we got the team to get this done. So have a short memory and go out there and continue to compete because he's that good. Caleb Williams is awesome, and he's going to make some plays, and they're going to score points, and he's going to have some big plays in the game. But if you stay in it and continue to apply pressure, you can force a turnover. And in this game, if a couple of turnovers for USC would do them in almost assuredly because I don't see the Ducks offense getting stopped too often. The only way the Ducks offense is going to be slowed down in this game is if they turn it over.
Wet ball, fumbles. That
lack of concentration.
Mm-hmm.
It would drive me insane. Like I couldn't imagine being Dan Lanning. You got a group of 18, 19, and 20-year-olds, except for Bo Nix, who's like 35 and has played like a billion college games. But trying to keep these guys focused week to week.
Yeah.
Especially when they read all the press clippings.
Yeah.
They know what's being said. They know the struggles that USC's had on defense.
And they know they're favored by 15 points.
They know.
Wow.
And this is part of the reason why college coaches are so crazy, because they're so worried about the things that they can't control, what their kids are doing, where their focus is at. That's a tough business. That's why these coaches are always uptight about everything, because they're worried about 100, 18, 19, and 20-year-olds and where their head's at and staying focused and not listening to all the outside noise, and why they only talk about one game at a time. And they don't look ahead to the next opponent or the big rivalry game. They try to stay focused on the task at hand, because they want to keep their kids focused on what's right in front of them that week, right?
Yeah.
It's tough to do, especially when the college football playoff rankings come out and you know you're number 6 and you know if you handle your business, you got a good chance to make the playoff. That's a lot going on. No wonder these coaches are gripping all the time. I would be.
Yeah, it's terrible. It's a brutal job, no question. It's a brutal job.
Oh.
Pressure from the alumni, administration. Are your kids going to class? Is somebody flunking out? Who's hurt? Who isn't? Who's having mental problems this week? Somebody's girlfriend dumped them. Whatever. You know, all these things that they're worried about, plus the other team and your execution.
That's where I think having an experienced guy like Bo Nix, who's played so many games, what a great resource he is, because he can communicate with the guys differently than any of the coaches can.
Mm-hmm.
So it probably helps to have a guy like that who's focused on doing it the right way to make sure that some of the other guys stay a little more locked in on the task at hand. It's got to help.
Yeah, and there's a guy with a lot more motivation than anybody else on that team. He's playing for a spot in the draft right now.
Yeah.
And probably a spot in New York for the Heisman Trophy presentation.
But think about how it's such a great story, Bo Nix. The opportunity to come to Oregon with the NIL and the transfer portal, he was considered a bust when he left Auburn.
Yeah.
But within 2 years, his entire image as a quarterback has been reshaped. And now that it's been reshaped, he's probably going to go in the first round in the draft. That's a pretty remarkable turnaround for a guy who was considered a failure at his previous school in Auburn.
Yeah, I remember when he was coming and people were saying, well, he might get drafted. He might be draftable, but no one was talking about him being a first rounder.
No one thought it made sense. No one thought it made sense. But it has worked out, and he's been even better than I think what they expected. He's been terrific, and he doesn't make bad decisions. 21 touchdowns and 1 pick? It's pretty awesome.
And they even changed offensive coordinators this year. That's what's amazing. And they haven't missed a beat.
Yeah.
That's pretty incredible.
Yeah, and I think we're seeing them get better as the year goes along.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that could be part of the issue of what we saw in the game at Washington, with some of the play call decisions they made on 4th down. You have a new coach and a new coordinator. They're still working through and trying to figure out the communication and the decision-making. That takes time, that type of we always talk about continuity on the offensive line or in different parts of the team, but there's continuity within a coaching staff too.
Yeah.
When it comes to decision-making and what to do in certain situations. So, yeah, it's good. This is a big game. The great thing about that game, Godfather, unlike Baltimore and Cleveland, I can guarantee great quarterback play, big plays, and a lot of offense.
A lot of big plays, great catches, great throws, big runs. You'll see it all, I think.
All right, when we come back, I saw a documentary that I'd like to recommend. And think about this, movie franchises or movies that have had a big impact on you. So think about that. We'll get into that discussion next. We'll talk football with Joe DeLeon. We'll get his take on the college football playoff rankings. Who's the best team in the country and which 4 does he think will be in at the end of the year? You got the Rip City Drive. When an NCAA champion and a WNBA star, Dee Richards, and Emmy-nominated sportscaster Chris Williamson, and a multimedia mogul, Terica Foster Brasby, join forces to form a big 3, the conversations quickly catch fire. Each of them lets fly with their unique perspectives on the biggest stories across the NBA, WNBA, and college basketball. From courtside drama to slam dunk analysis, this talented trio is always wide open and most definitely dangerous. Get ready to go beyond the score lines and stats as they break down the game, bring you exclusive interviews, and offer insights that you won't find anywhere else. Whether you're a hardcore hoops fan or just getting into the game, 3 on 3 is your go-to source for all things basketball. Tune into this explosive trio every week on the iHeartRadio app.
In this tip, I'm giving you a great, path. So imagine there's an arc here. Golf club would swing back like this. Now it's swinging slightly from the inside to out, like this. Inside. Okay, that's the path.
You're listening to the Rip City Drive with Dwight and Chad on 620 Rip City Radio. Brought to you by Lazy Boy. What's your strategy for comfort? Listen on your free iHeartRadio app for all your music, radio, and podcasts.
All right, Dwight and I will share our takeaways from the Trailblazers game last night in Sacramento coming up at 5, and then we'll talk football with Joe DeLeon coming up at 5:20. Want to really get an idea of who he thinks will be the final 4 teams to make the college football playoff. Big games this weekend in college football I can't believe it, the season is nearing an end.
Yeah.
We're just down to the last few games, which is pretty crazy, and we're awaiting word today or tomorrow. We'll find out what the Big Ten Conference is going to do with Michigan, if anything. So we'll get Joe's take on the sign stealing and the investigation that's ongoing right now. I wanted to ask you, I watched the Sylvester Stallone documentary that's on Netflix right now.
Mhm.
It's about an hour and 30 minutes, hour and 40, maybe an hour and 45. I loved it, but I'm also a big Sylvester Stallone fan
Yeah.
for the work that he's done over the years, and I love the Rocky franchise. And I was thinking back through movies that have had a big impact on me. Clearly, when I was young, Star Wars was mind-blowing,
Sure.
and especially the first 3. I thought that was fabulous. Superman, the first couple of movies with Christopher Reeves, because I was younger and I was fascinated by superheroes.
Of course.
So I
Did-
love that.
The Batman series, yeah, did you like that?
Yeah, it was good, but I'm not a big Batman guy.
Oh, you're not? Okay.
No, I thought the first with, Jack and Michael Keaton was terrific.
Mm-hmm.
It was really good. Danny DeVito is a creepy villain. I thought he was pretty good. So those movies are okay, but I think the Rocky franchises for me have the biggest impact. But what I like about this documentary is that it goes into his life, and I learned things that I didn't know before. And that's what I like when I tune into something, is to learn something that maybe I didn't know. When it's especially something that I really like or someone that I admire or know a lot about. His upbringing was rough, man, really tough. Family life was not good. His father was a disciplinarian, and he said matters were often solved not by word, but by physical action. It was a tougher time back then. And movies, he and his brother, Frank, would go and watch a lot of movies, and that was kind of his way of escape. And he started acting when he was, still in school, through plays and stuff like that, and kind of got a bug for it. But he could never really get an opportunity to be a lead man because he had, a different voice, and he was born with a defect, and his delivery was a little bit off and stuff. But he started writing, and what he started doing was writing parts or rewriting scripts. He would get scripts, or he got a job at a theater where he was like an usher. He would carry around a tape recorder and record the movies, and then he would take it home and transcribe it, and then rewrite the script. And he learned how to write in a way that he spoke so that he could learn how to act and be a lead man.
Wow.
And he started writing things, and the first guy that gave him a real opportunity, he became friends with Henry Winkler. And from there, he kept pushing and came up with the idea for Rocky, and he wrote the entire script himself, and they offered to pay him upwards of around $250,000, but he was firm on no, because I know if I sell this, I'm going to regret not having the opportunity to do what I think I can do. And it turned out to be a smash success.
Yeah.
And then he was one of the few guys to be a lead Hollywood actor, but also write and produce these movies, which
Yeah.
I think is really unique. Even with Rambo, he studied Vietnam vets for years and came up with the language on how they spoke and the communication, and that's how he started developing the character of Rambo and how to write and came up with the script for that. And he stood firm on that, where they wanted him, the original movie had him dying at the end with the cop
Yeah.
taking him out. And he's like, look, I'm not going to do that. And he walked out on the movie, and they threatened to sue and all this stuff because he didn't want to cause trauma to Vietnam vets, because the suicide rate back in that day was very high for Vietnam vets, and he didn't want to contribute to that. Well, they tested the movie with the original ending, and it bombed. So they went back and changed it with the way Stallone had talked about, and it ended up being a smash success for him. So I like guys that can overcome. But the Rocky movie is always inspiration. That's kind of what got me into wanting to work out and train and exercise, something I still do today, and I've had the same workout partner for 31 years. I like the love story that's involved. Those movies have been awesome, and I loved it when Travis and I went back to Philadelphia a few years ago, and I had a chance to go to the Rocky Steps and everything. But if you are a Stallone fan or you like some of his movies, I think you'll enjoy the documentary. But do you have any movie franchises like that or movies that had a major impact on you?
Yeah, like you, I liked the first 3 Star Wars. I kind of lost track of it after that. I liked, oh gosh, Indiana Jones was always a favorite of mine because it was action adventure with a touch of humor, and I always liked that. There were funny moments in those movies.
He was a terrific in that role too.
Yeah, I watched even the latest one, which wasn't really good compared to the other ones, but I enjoyed it. The Mission Impossible franchise, I've stayed with because I like those. I think they're really well done production wise, and he does his own stunts. But for one movie that I've remembered my whole life is Chinatown with Jack Nicholson and Faye Dunaway and John Huston, who plays the most villainous villain you could ever have in a movie. It was incredible. But he was a private eye, former LAPD detective, and became a private eye. And he had worked in Chinatown, and then at the conclusion, something really bad happens in Chinatown. The movie did not have a happy ending, which I always believe is more realistic than those artificial happy endings. But the great line was, after this horrible thing happened at the end, one of his former police partners looked at him and said, "Don't think about it, Jake. It's Chinatown." Jake Geddes was his name. And oh man, what a movie. Chad, if you ever get a chance to watch it, it's considered one of the greatest movies of all time and maybe the greatest mystery of all time. It's that good. Robert Towne wrote the script, and it's a tremendous script.
I love Jack.
Yeah.
He's terrific. But you know what's funny about Stallone and a lot of these people? We've seen this in sports all the time, too. Think about how many people turned out to be tremendous successes when initially they were told, no, you can't do this. You're not made for this. You don't have the ability to do this. Roadblocks everywhere. But the perseverance and the pursuit and the dream to want to do something, and you find a way to get it done. There are so many examples of that in all phases of life where people get objection after objection after objection, but these unique individuals that can overcome that and continue to pursue, even with all the struggle, and they get to the point where they want, that's pretty amazing to me.
Yeah, I've always heard them say about comedians, unless you've been so down and out that you had to sleep on somebody else's couch, you're not going to make it. There has to be that desperation where you hit bottom and then not give up, but just keep climbing back.
Yeah. He also said that, you know, everything he thought it would be to finally become a success, when Rocky hit and he became an international star overnight, you know, you get to the top of the mountain, it's not what he expected.
Yeah.
Because as soon as you make a movie like that, or you write a movie like that, then the next question is, can he do it again? Was it a flash in the pan? What are you? People start to doubt you, and then you go right through that cycle again. So it's got to be a wild ride to go through that. I remember Sports Illustrated, the idea of Sports Illustrated when it was created, they ran into objection. No one wants a weekly sports magazine. They thought it was crazy. And it turned out to be a smash success.
Yeah.
How many of us sports fans grew up with the SI subscription? I remember where I was at when my mom told me that she got me the subscription. I was blown away.
Yeah, that's the greatest in its day. Those pictures, beautiful photography, sports photography that you'd never seen before.
Yeah.
Incredible stuff.
And it just happened by coincidence that the first issue I got, Elway was on the cover. I was like, this is the greatest thing ever. You got to be
But
kidding
Chad,
me.
you know what? Before we go on this segment, you got to admit, you made it from, you didn't have a father that got you into this business. You didn't have an easy entry. You worked your tail off to get where you are now, and I was pretty much, I started for $2.20 an hour at the Oregon Journal answering telephones. And not, hey, I'm not a big time guy, but I did okay. I made a few bucks, and I've had a life that I can't believe I had.
Yeah, I still can't believe that, I'm doing what I'm doing.
You were hosting morning radio in San Francisco with all those teams and all those big shots, interviewing everybody in the sports world you ever wanted to talk to. It's an incredible career you've built out of a kid in Vancouver who was kind of a goofball as a kid.
The one moment that I always remember was Jerry Rice looking me in the eye when I was like, dude, I challenge you to a race up your hills that you used to train on. He said, name the time. Couldn't believe that.
So did you?
No. No, I did not do that. No. But he was ready. He was ready to annihilate me.
Yeah, that would have been a good stunt, though.
All right, we'll come back. We got to share our thoughts on the Blazers last night, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And the bright side is we're getting that incremental growth that no one wants to hear about, but it's important. And that's what the Blazers are doing right now. And then we'll talk football with Joe Daly on at 5:20.
Oh, wow, that's a great alternative, that's for sure. It's a great movie.
Here's what you need to know. From the Goldberg Jones Sports Desk, your 620 Rip City Radio headlines. Goldberg Jones. Call 1-800-DIVORCE.
All right, it's now 5 o'clock. Chad here. Your Portland Trailblazers took a tough overtime loss last night in Sacramento. Jeremy Grant had 38 points, and Skylar Mays recorded a double-double, stepping in for Malcolm Brogdon, who exited after a hamstring injury. They're back in action Sunday in L.A. against the Lakers. Tip-off at 7, and I'll have game day starting at 4:30. Portland is 3-5 on the year. Great game tonight on Thursday Night Football. Bears and Panthers, Chicago favored by 3.5. Kickoffs coming up at 5:15. The Vikings and All-Pro wide receiver on the same page. Jefferson won't play in a game until his injured right hammy is fully healed. We've got a big weekend in college football coming up on Saturday. In the Pac-12, Utah's at Washington, 12:30 on Fox. Huskies a 9.5-point favorite. Stanford at Oregon State. Beavs a 20.5-point favorite. And USC's at Oregon, 15-point favorites. The Ducks are. Kickoff at 7:30 on Fox.
The home of the OSAA is 620 Rip City.
And the funny thing is, with my hair, you can see the gray coming in on the sides. And I shaved this morning, but of course, when my whiskers pop out, the few that I have, they're mostly gray now.
They are getting real gray.
And the funny thing is about getting older is that you don't recognize it all at once. It's a subtle situation. And for me, it was like one moment where I remember being in the bathroom and the sunlight was coming in, one of the rare days we have sunshine out here. And it's one of those moments where the light's hitting you in the perfect spot, and you're like, wait a second. I'm not a young man anymore. You see the gray for what it is. But I'm one of those people where I'm not worried about getting older. Dude, I work out, man. I've been working out straight for 31 years. I've got the same workout partner. I watch what I eat. I take more vitamins than the average human being. I feel good. I feel better now today than I ever have in my life.
Wow.
I don't know how long that's going to last, but I feel good. The hardest part for me about getting older, I think, is recognizing that time is short. And I know that none of us have a guarantee for how long we're going to be here, but I look now and I'm like, you know, all the opportunities, like I just want to make the most of what I got left, because you realize how quickly it goes by. It's a strange process to get older.
I really enjoy reading the remarks on the Facebook page. Yeah, somebody put
YouTube or Facebook?
The YouTube. I'm sorry, YouTube. Slugworth said, after you were talking about looking old, Dwight looks older. Oh, how can you say that? I'm only decades older than him.
Yeah, it is what it is. What can you do?
Yeah.
The one thing I'm never going to do, I can guarantee this, I'm not coloring my hair. I'm not coloring the beard. I'm not coloring the hair.
Come on.
I'm never doing it. Because every time I see a guy that tries to get cute with the color, it's a disaster, because I know right away, like, that guy colors his hair.
Yeah, but the guys that do it well, you don't know. There's a way to do it. So
I don't believe there are guys that do it well.
Oh, half these guys on television are died.
No, I can tell. I can tell. You show me a guy, like someone the other day asked me, could you tell the difference between a black Americano and a black cup of coffee? I'm like, yes. And I can tell the difference between a cup of coffee and a decaf cup of coffee. That's how in tune my tastes are. My trained eye, even though my eyesight, because of my age, is getting worse, not better, I can tell the difference. I can tell. I'm like, wait a second, that guy, that's not legit. Or you see some guys who are so old, and it's like, wait a second, what, no gray? Well, who are you trying to fool here?
Yeah, how about the guys that get a little facial work done, you know, some
Kenny Rogers.
surgery?
Yeah, you can see that right away. And I've seen some women that get the work done. I'm like, why'd they do that? Why'd you do that? You were looking just fine.
Yeah, the one that I don't really understand is the collagen in the lips. Make you look like Daffy Duck, kind of, you know, big lips sticking out.
Yeah.
It's like, nah.
Yeah,
Save your money.
I don't need the plastic surgery. I'm not going to go that direction. Like, I am what I am, right? There's not enough work or money in the world that can make me look good. Yeah, I embrace what I am.
You're a handsome guy.
No, George Clooney's a handsome guy.
Well, yeah, but there's only one of him. There's other degrees of handsome.
And George Clooney ain't coloring his hair. He looking good, man.
Are you sure he's not?
Yeah. Yeah, it looks too good. George Clooney is not coloring his hair. Because George Clooney knows whether my hair is gray, no matter what color my hair is, I'm still looking good. I just tipped the cap, said, "Good for you, partner. That's a handsome man right there." I know my lot in life, and I'm okay with it. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not worried about what other people think about my appearance. I am what I am. I take showers. I'm clean. I work out. I'm in good health for the time being, and whatever people think, they think. I'm not too worried about that stuff.
I know one thing you're worried about.
What's that?
Getting tickets to Taylor Swift.
It's not happening. Here's what happened. So I had a listener who was so kind to reach out and say, "Look," because I got put on the waiting list again. A total punk job, right? So this listener reached out and said, "Hey, I have access. I got the password. I got in for the shows up in Vancouver, and I'm not going to need all 4 tickets, so I'll buy you 2. Sounds great." She gets in today, has the tickets in the queue, and hits pay. And she got flagged for fraudulent activity on the card.
Whoa.
And I've had that happen before, too, where when I go on one of my various spending sprees in different states, where all of a sudden I'm, accumulating larger bills than normal.
Yeah.
Every once in a while I get flagged. My credit card company will make me approve certain, purchases. Was this that came through in Phoenix, Arizona? Yes. And what happens is that it's just fraud protection, right? But you don't want the fraud protection to pop up when you're waiting on Taylor Swift tickets and you've only got a matter of minutes to be able to get that purchase done.
How much were the tickets?
Not cheap. Yeah.
You're not going to say, though, huh?
They weren't cheap. Let's just put it that way. This is not discount. This is not dollar store.
More expensive than we've paid for the Eagles?
Oh, yeah. 100%. Yeah, I can say that with pure confidence. More expensive than Eagles tickets. I just checked the Eagles show I was looking at going down to in L.A. at the Forum. I found a seat I like for like $149.
Wow, that's cheap for the Eagles.
Yeah. Taylor Swift, though, right now is the hottest item that you can buy tickets for. So, yeah, you're looking anywhere between, $300 to $800 and up for regularly priced tickets on Ticketmaster.
Right, from the original
not secondary market.
Yeah, secondary market's crazy, right?
And now what I was told is that the tickets that she had in the queue to purchase before getting denied, those same tickets are now being resold for $3,200. Because you know what people are doing? They're going in to buy with no intention of going to the show. They just want to resell and make a mad profit.
Yeah, it's ticket brokers, and they actually have machines doing that.
Yeah.
Dialing in and getting online.
Yeah, they can suck it.
Yeah.
They're getting over. And now someone told me today that the IRS, I know this is a big shocker, but the IRS, probably because of some of the steam from the Taylor Swift tour, the IRS wants to get their hand on the secondary ticket market for the profits that people are raking in.
Yeah.
It's actually pretty genius. And I would have done this too if I was in a position to get, 4 tickets of my own. I would have bought 4 tickets, used 2, and then I could have resold 2 of them and made enough money to pay for my trip up to Vancouver, BC, make the daughter happy, and put a little extra money in the bank. It's genius. A lot of people do that with Trailblazer tickets, right?
Yeah.
They'll buy season tickets, and they'll take advantage of the fake Warriors/fake Laker fans that are all the same people in their Crown Royal bags, and they'll overpay to get into Motor Center for the games. So you pick and choose a couple of games to sell well over face value to pay for your season ticket. That's a smart way to do it. It's not a bad idea. Because certain fan bases are idiots, and they'll pay more for the tickets than what they probably should because they got money.
Yeah.
Especially people from the Bay Area or Silicon Valley where they got so much money they don't know what to do with themselves. So what they do is they buy summer homes up in Portland and clog up our streets and try to take our resources. Things like that. That's how that goes down.
Well, I can't be too happy about doing that anymore.
They're coming up here?
Yeah.
Well, San Francisco is not exactly
well, that's true.
a haven,
Yeah,
a safe haven in these days.
No, it's worse than here, I think.
Yeah. All right. Trailblazers last night. My biggest issue with the game, I thought the Blazers had good stretches of play, but the last couple of minutes of the game, they're up by 5. They should win the game. You get the foul from Shaden Sharp on a 3, which cut the lead to 2. You get a couple of turnovers from both Shaden and Jeremy Grant. You get a bad foul from Shaden that put Malik Monk on the line to tie the game. He scored their final 9 points to force overtime. And then you get a couple of iffy shots down the stretch on a strong drive by Skylar Mays, who had to put up a difficult shot around the rim, high degree of difficulty. And then 8.3 seconds on the clock in a tie game, and the best that Chauncey Billups could draw up was a hoisted 3 at the top of the circle from Skylar Mays.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought the last shot was unfortunate. And Skylar Mays played a good game. Take nothing away from him, but I'd like to see either Ayton or Grant with that shot. I also, in that situation where the game's tied, Chad, what you really like to see is somebody take the ball to the basket, because out of 3 officials, one of them probably has a date after the game. So you figure he doesn't want overtime. He's going to put you at the line because it was a tie. Or all it takes is one of those 2 free throws, and the game's probably over, and they can go home early.
That's part of a young team, right?
Yeah.
One of the big struggles is learning how to close out games to make the right play. The good thing is, here's the best part of what I see. Even when they make mistakes, the guys were in the right position. We saw a lot of effort on both ends of the floor. Like any team, they had a couple of defensive breakdowns, but for the most part, we saw them continuing to defend.
Yeah.
We saw some movement and running of the offense. So one thing I like about the players that are on the floor right now, because there's not that one go-to guy, even though Coach Wells wants Grant to be more aggressive, we're seeing a lot of different guys touch the ball.
Yeah.
Even at the end of games. That's a good thing.
Yeah. No, I had no complaints about the game. And again, we're looking for development. We're not looking for wins and not losses. So for me, that game was a bright spot. I really thought. Road game. Come on.
All right, here's a tweet. Jeffrey, who won the Take Me Up to the Ball Game package, who went to the Mariners series.
Right.
He's a big Husky fan. And he says, if Washington wins out, will you all finally give the Huskies some respect? And look, I love what Washington has done this year.
Yeah.
Kalen DeBoer has proven to be a phenomenal football coach. The big question with him is long-term, can he recruit at a high level to get the talent that will be needed to compete in the Big Ten? We'll wait and see on that. But terrific job he's done. They brought Michael Penix in, and similar to what Bo Nix has had, he has rejuvenated his entire football career and is now going to be one of the top quarterbacks taken in the draft. They've won games over the last couple of weeks where they didn't play their best football, and I think that's a sign of a good team when you can find ways to overcome. Michael Penix is having another Heisman-worthy type season. Yeah. They've got big playmakers on the outside, and they're in a great position to reach the college football playoff for the second time. I love everything about what Washington has done. I'm just saying that when I look at the 2 teams right now, Oregon and Washington, and what I've seen since the Oregon-Washington game up in Seattle, I think Oregon is playing better football than Washington right now.
Yeah, and I think just because we say if they meet again, Oregon will win, that doesn't mean we're disrespecting Washington.
Yeah.
And I look back at the Oregon-Washington game, and I can just tell you this from somebody who's unbiased. I watched the game. The game was decided because the Ducks missed a routine field goal that would have sent it into overtime. That's how close that game was. So don't act like Oregon got routed in that game. Didn't happen.
I agree with that. I also do like the results of games to actually matter.
Yeah.
So Washington should absolutely be ranked ahead of Oregon right now because they played, one team won, the other team did not, and I want that result to mean something.
Yeah, I go with the eyeball test. Oregon's better than them right now.
I just agree with you. I think Oregon's a better team right now, but I like that Washington's ranked ahead because I want, when the 2 teams, when you're trying to compare teams and they have played a game, there's got to be some weight on the result of the football game. You don't agree with that?
No.
That we should just throw out the result of the game. It doesn't matter?
Yeah. Washington State beat Oregon State. But if you ask me who the better team is right now, Oregon State is. I would have told you that 2 weeks after they played, that Oregon State was a better team. Yeah, Washington.
So you think Oregon should be ranked ahead of Washington in the college football rankings right now?
Well, I have no doubt at the end they will be.
If they beat them again, right? You're saying if they win out.
Yeah, for sure. No,
So you're working off the assumption Oregon's going to beat Washington in the Pac-12 title game.
I am.
Okay.
I think Oregon is better than Washington right now.
So you think they should be ranked ahead of Washington in the college football playoff rankings?
Yeah.
Even though one team's undefeated and the 2 teams played each other and Washington won.
Well, you can look through the rankings and see examples of that through the rankings where teams are ranked.
Texas beat Alabama, and they're still ranked ahead of Alabama. They put meaning on that game.
Yeah.
So I think both teams are ranked where they should be right now. Oregon will have a chance to prove themselves. And then what happens if Oregon and Washington play and then Washington beats them by a field goal again?
Well, if they've beaten them twice, then that counts for something. But I understand the reality of winning a game because a kicker goes out there on a 42-yard field goal and misses it. That doesn't prove you're the better team. You didn't even have anything to do. It's not like you blocked the field goal. He just missed it.
That's true, but when Oregon gave Washington the football after a bad decision from their coach, Washington capitalized with 2 big passes down the sideline from their quarterback. They capitalized on the opportunity which was given.
Right.
I just like giving teams credit for winning a football game instead of making excuses as to why the other team should have won the game.
Yeah, but it's a beauty contest anyway. It's crazy stuff. It's crazy stuff. Instead of having the playoff like we will next year, you're just deciding who's the better team right now, end of the season, who should be in the playoff. I think for me it would be Oregon.
Well, the good thing is, if both teams handle business, we're going to be able to see them play again.
Absolutely.
So if Oregon were to lose by a field goal because their kicker missed a field goal at the end of regulation in the Pac-12 title game, would you give Washington the nod as being the better team?
They'd have to, and they would. But I don't know that they'd actually be the better team. I'm just glad we no longer have Northern Division, Southern Division, because Oregon would be probably out of it.
What I care about, I don't give a flying rip about resume. Just somehow find a way to get the 4 best teams in. Give me the 4 best teams in college football. That's what I care most about.
If the Pac-12 had North and South, though, Washington would have it almost locked up if they beat Oregon State.
I'm glad that they have it changed now where we get the top 2 teams matching up.
That matters.
All right, Joe DeLeon is going to join us next. We'll get his take on the college football playoff rankings and which 4 teams do you think will be the last 4 standing at the end of the season. When an NCAA champion and a WNBA star, Dean Richards, and Emmy-nominated sportscaster Chris Williamson, and a multimedia mogul, Erica Foster Brasby, join forces to form a big 3, the conversations quickly catch fire. Each of them lets fly with their unique perspective on the biggest stories across the NBA, WNBA, and college basketball. From courtside drama to slam dunk analysis, this talented trio is always wide open and most definitely dangerous. Get ready to go beyond the score lines and stats as they break down the game, bring you exclusive interviews, and offer insights that you won't find anywhere else. Whether you're a hardcore hoops fan or just getting into the game, 3 on 3 is your go-to source for all things basketball, including this explosive trio every week on the iHeartRadio app.
City Drive, brought to you by Lazy Boy. What's your strategy for comfort? Here on 620 Rip City Radio. Listen on your free iHeartRadio app for all your music, radio, and podcasts.
All right, our next guest is a college football and NFL draft analyst for the Believe Podcast Network, the First Team Pod. And he's back on the show. You can follow him on Twitter at Joe DeLeon. Joe, good afternoon. It's great to have you back on the show. And we're live streaming our shows on YouTube now. And Shacker told me he had to reach out and say, hey, I got to get a picture from Joe. And I was like, dude, this guy has got plenty of pictures. I was hoping you would give him one with your impressive biceps, man. You're the man.
I don't have any current ones with me flexing, but I tried to get them what I could.
Okay.
I tried to get them what I could.
Well, we want to start with this. What are your impressions on the college football playoff rankings with the top teams, the top four being the same, and, of course, the first two teams out being Washington and Oregon?
Yeah, I'm still really perplexed by the decision for the committee to place Ohio State at number one. It's a joke at this point that we hear from the representative from the committee saying that Rutgers was a quality win for Ohio State this past weekend. I understand that Ohio State has played some really good football, but their resume is starting to look worse and worse, especially after the way that Notre Dame played this past week. I just don't – it doesn't make any sense to me how after watching Georgia dominate their way through most of their games and then when they play bad, find ways to win, and then most importantly, got themselves a nice ranked win against Missouri, for them to not place Georgia at number one. I think after this week, after they beat Ole Miss, it is unjustifiable to not place them at number one, especially if they do it defiantly and do it by a number of scores. Georgia, for me right now, though, without a doubt, the number one team in the country.
All right, Joe, I'm going to jump you over to the NFL real quick. I can't figure out the Buffalo Bills from week to week. What's going on there?
I just feel as though they might have hit their ceiling. You know, they might have, for whatever reason, they don't have the offensive bodies at receiver to really stretch opposing defenses. Stephon Diggs is a phenomenal player, but it seems like Gabe Davis is not very threatening as a second receiver, and you would hope that Dalton Kincaid would have more of an impact than he's had so far, but he's just a rookie. Rookie tight ends very, very rarely will have huge impacts. Not everybody's going to get Sam Laporta like the Lions have right now. So I really think it is the receiver position because defensively they've been pretty strong. They have suffered some key injuries, but receiver right now is pretty weak for them.
Hey, Joe, I'm pretty blown away right now by C.J. Stroud and his play. We saw the 400-plus yard performance and 5 touchdowns this past weekend. I didn't know what to expect from him coming in the NFL, but I'm not expecting this, especially with the franchise that he wound up on in the Texans. What's your takeaway from his play thus far?
Well, I think it's, first of all, the perfect pairing and the perfect situation for him to land in. A first-year head coach in D'Amico Ryans, who many had for a long time spoken about what he was going to do once he got his first head coaching gig. So he's in a situation where they've got nothing to lose. They're out there trying to get better every single week. And they're just playing ball. They look like they're having fun. I think that's what makes C.J. Stroud so good this year is that when he was at Ohio State, when he played his worst, at times it was because he was overthinking and he was over-evaluating and things just weren't opening up the way that he could envision and that he could see the field clearly to make good plays separate from that first read. But the offense that they're playing in right now with all these receivers, these young receivers, it's just allowing him to be free and play football. He does have that capability to almost play that backyard style of football like we see with Patrick Mahomes and Jalen Hurts that's so coveted these days in quarterbacks. And I see that right now with Stroud. That lack of pressure on his shoulders is helping him play well.
Okay, speaking of quarterbacks, Lamar Jackson and the Ravens. What's your take on those guys so far?
Man, that defense is scary good. I know some people are trying to compare them to that Ray Lewis defense. I don't think they're there just yet, but they over the past couple of years have just continually accumulated more and more defensive talent. And not only defensive talent, but they seemingly ended up in situations where guys that should not have fallen in their lap did. And the perfect example of that is Kyle Hamilton, who is a very, very explosive athlete, a very unique player at safety. And they've got guys like Roquan Smith that are playing well. They just have so many athletes on defense, not just a well-coached defense. but it's an athletic and a fast one, and it plays to the identity of this team that Lamar Jackson doesn't need to do everything, that the defense is really setting them up to succeed. And the biggest part is Lamar Jackson being at a point in his career where he knows how to stay healthy. I think early on we saw a guy who was running a lot and maybe not avoiding contact effectively, and that was leading to a number of injuries early on in his career. But him being healthy, fully available, is always going to be really critical for the Ravens' success.
We're talking with Joe DeLeon, who's a college football and NFL draft analyst from the Believe Podcast Network. All right, with the Chiefs, this year is interesting for them because they've got young receivers. Their offense is not clicking the way that we're accustomed to. But in a way, do you think they're more dangerous this year because their defense is playing so well, and that's something that could travel and be very productive come postseason time?
Oh, absolutely. And I think that the past few years, one of the biggest drawbacks whenever the Chiefs were down was because their defense was not playing up to the level of their offense. And it's ironic that we're at this point where it feels like it's the opposite, but poor offensive performance for the Chiefs is still way better than most of the NFL. Them playing poorly is still above average in the NFL. So for their defense to be able to carry their weight, and then also on top of that, it's very similar to the Ravens situation where they're sitting there at the back end of the draft, they're accumulating picks, and they're just letting guys fall into their lap. Trent McDuffie, George Karlaftis, all of these guys that they have accumulated, Leo Chenal, Nick Bolton, these guys that fell the end of the first round, second round, has just allowed them to get this bevy of defensive talent. And again, they're athletic, just like the Ravens, that they can do all this damage. And it helps that Steve Spagnuolo is the one who is calling this defense, because we know when he's got the guys, he can be very, very creative. So I absolutely think that does make them incredibly dangerous. And I'm sure eventually they will find that offensive identity.
What are your thoughts on the Eagles? I mean, there they are on top, even though I think a lot of us have kind of questioned throughout the season so far about whether they're playing their best or not. What do you think?
Well, I think that the Eagles are an interesting case study to look at so far this year, because one could argue that they're beating up on a very weak NFC East. Last year, the NFC East was fantastic, and then this year it's just a complete and utter mess. And even the Cowboys, who's the second best team, haven't really looked that consistent on a week-to-week basis. But we know what has made them so good is, one, the way that they run the football, all of the defensive pieces that they have on the opposite side of the football, where they were getting old and now they're starting to get young again. But more importantly, I think that Jalen Hurts is starting to ascend into that point where he is being asked to play maybe a little more from the pocket, and he's doing it really effectively. He's doing it at a level where early on in his career, his biggest weapon was his legs, and now he's at this point where he feels like he is very balanced in his play style. So I think that Jalen Hurts, as he grows, he's still such a young quarterback. As he grows on a year-to-year basis, he just becomes more and more dangerous.
We're talking with Joe DeLeon here on the Rip City Drive. All right, we want to really focus in on Oregon and Washington here and talk about the Pac-12. The Ducks, first off, I noticed this when they dropped the rankings this week, and this is something that Herb Street and the crew were talking about was, Texas sitting there with one loss, their chance to win the Big 12, and they've got the win over Alabama. How do you think the committee is going to view Texas compared to a team like Oregon, where you could have two conference champs sitting there with one loss?
I would hope the committee is smart enough to acknowledge that Texas's schedule up until this point has been pretty weak. If you look at the Big 12 as a whole, it's not a G5 conference, but there have not really been any teams outside of Oklahoma, Oklahoma State, and Kansas, and maybe Kansas State, that have been competitive. There's a lot of teams that have decent records, but have completely faltered in a lot of their games. So I think that if you look at Texas's resume, yes, that Alabama game looks good, but outside of that, their opportunity to really bolster their schedule and who they've played so far, they've missed out when they didn't beat Oklahoma. So I really think that Oregon is going to benefit from the fact that they have beaten up on a team that is going to be ranked at the end of the year in Utah. They probably will beat up on Oregon State when they play them. And assuming that they do end up playing Washington again in the Pac-12 championship game, if they win that football game, they deserve to go. I would much rather see, and I think that we can agree that Oregon has been more dominant on a week-to-week basis compared to Texas, that Oregon belongs in the playoff more than Texas does if they win the Pac-12 rather.
All right, here in the Northwest, the consensus is that Oregon is playing better football than Washington right now, and we would both agree with that. But with the Huskies, the last couple of weeks they have not looked super sharp. What are your thoughts on Washington and why they're struggling a bit, and how would you compare them to the Ducks?
Yeah, Washington's situation right now is a little perplexing, and I don't know the certainty of this, but I've heard a couple of times on other shows that I've listened to that they might have been dealing with some sort of a flu outbreak. And I know that Florida State had something similar when they almost lost to Boston College. I don't know the legitimacy of that because that's a little bit of an indirect source. But their performance after they had those two really bad games against Arizona State and they didn't look very good against Stanford, I think that we saw their true capabilities against USC. I know that they gave up a lot of points to USC, but USC still has a number of first-rounders in the receiving room. Caleb Williams is going to be the top pick in the NFL draft this upcoming year. They're still really talented to give up that many points. I was impressed by the fact that their run game looked as good as it did because it hadn't really shown up so far. But what makes Washington so dangerous and what made them dangerous against Oregon when they beat them the first time is that whenever they need to score, their offense can get down the field in an instant. Rome Odunze, Jalen Polk, Jalen McMillan, all of those guys are elite receivers. There are not many teams in college football that have 3 top 50 picks at the receiver position. So for all of those guys to be as impactful as they are and to get open as easily as they can makes them dangerous just on a drive-to-drive basis.
All right, so between those two teams, I want you to forecast for me, Joe. How do you see the Pac-12 race playing out between Oregon and Washington?
I don't really think anyone's going to challenge them up until they play each other in the Pac-12 championship game. But I always say this, and I always lean on this. Whenever you play a good team twice, you'll find a way to win. It's very hard to beat, or it's very hard for a team like Washington to come in and beat them a second time, especially now that Oregon has those issues, those deficiencies of Washington on film against them. And Dan Lanning's going to know how to handle himself better in those situations that he made poor decisions. So if they do face off again, I'm going to lean Oregon in that situation.
So if you had to pick 4 teams, who would be the 4 right now that you think are going to be standing at the end to make the playoff?
I think that the 4 that are most likely as of right now are Georgia, Michigan, and then I really do believe, I really do believe that if it comes down to 2 one-loss Pac-12 teams, we could see Washington and Oregon both get in. If that does not occur, Ohio State would probably be that 4th team, and then theoretically Oregon would be the one that gets in if they win the Pac-12.
Wow, that's fascinating. Okay, what if, and I understand we're throwing a lot of ifs at you, but what if Bama were to beat Georgia in a close one in the SEC title game? What does the committee do with those 2?
That really complicates things because then we're in a situation where you probably would end up having Georgia as 2 and Alabama as 2 and Georgia as 3, and it's reminiscent to a few years ago. I think it was 2021 when we witnessed something very similar happen with the SEC. They absolutely will not keep out 2 SEC teams if they have 1 loss, if 2 teams have 1 loss. I would find it very hard to believe for them to find a way to not get them into the playoffs. And then if that does happen, I really do think that Michigan wins out so that they would then claim that number 1 spot.
Wow. All right, who's your pick for the Heisman?
I heavily lean Michael Penix right now because I just think he's playing fantastic football, but a bit of a long shot pick. I think that Ollie Gordon's performance so far this year has been amazing. The way that he impacts Oklahoma State, their offense on a week-to-week basis. I mean, the award's supposed to go to the most valuable player in the country, and the fact that early on in the season, Mike Gundy decided, hey, I don't want to give Ollie Gordon all these carries. I want to go to other guys. And they lost a lot of bad games. And then immediately, as soon as they started feeding this kid, he exploded. It's not like he's going for 150. He's got all these 250-yard games. And the reason why they beat Oklahoma last week was because of him. He is somebody, even with a bad offensive line blocking for him, he still finds ways to get yards. I really like this Ollie Gordon kid, but it's really tough for a running back to win it unless they're on a team that's in the national championship conversation.
What do you think the Big Ten's response will be to the Michigan investigation?
One of the best projections that I've heard out there, because that Tony Petitti has a law background, he's a Harvard Law graduate. I think that in order for him to have a win-win is to attempt to levy a very heavy punishment on Michigan for their actions. And then that opens the door for Michigan to countersue and then likely win, and then to ultimately just completely slow down the process so that Jim Harbaugh would be able to coach for the remainder of the season. And then eventually, if Michigan ends up winning that court case, everything is then absolved, and Tony Petitti gets to say to the rest of the teams, I tried to do what you guys asked me to do, and then Michigan on the other side ends up not being impacted. I still lean, and I've been kind of against the grain, I still lean that I think that trying to make an unprecedented rush decision would be very, very bad for the conference.
All right, I've got two more questions for you because you're blowing my mind right now. First off, if Florida State remains unbeaten, are they in the playoff, or would the committee move them out based on resume?
Well, I think without a doubt that they get in. When you're a Power 5 conference and you go undefeated, you absolutely earn the right to get into the playoff. I know last year was a very complicated circumstance with all the teams that ended up having losses at the end of the year. But for TCU to win their conference and to sneak in with one loss, I think proves that they value these Power 5 teams that finish with good records, win their TCU didn't win their conference last year, but win their conference, have a good record. Florida State, we've seen be dominant. We've seen Florida State put up these big games, and they've been dealing with some injuries. I think that they're going to finish off the season very strong, and there should be no reason that they don't get in.
All right. This is something that Dwight and I have talked about this week. We saw it with the Raiders to a degree with McDaniels being fired, this first game coach bump. What type of an impact do you think the Grinch firing will have with two assistants taking over the defense? Can we expect maybe a coach bump where USC might play a little bit better on defense, or is that going to be too much to ask in 1 week preparing for Oregon?
I think it's going to be a really incremental bump because for the fact that if you watch a lot of Alex Grinch's decision-making, it's jaw-dropping some of the stupidity that he's put out there, some of the just insane coverage decisions. We saw last week there were plays where the whole right side of the field had one guy trying to cover multiple receivers. It was crazy. So whoever's calling these plays this week, they're going to be doing a better job. And the approach is going to be to simplify things and just to keep an offense in front of them, especially against an Oregon team that's moving the ball as easily as they are. But at the same time, it's still a very poorly coached unit. Their biggest issue is that they're not tackling well. They have not tackled well in 2 years. So that stuff is going to still linger. Maybe that there's a little bit more of an emphasis on stop trying to force turnovers and make more tackles. That will help them. But if there is a bump, it's going to be very, very small.
Well, I tell you what, Dwight, that was a nice little clinic he just put on for us.
Absolutely.
Hey, Joe, you are the man. Thank you so much for your time. You got to make sure you follow him on Twitter at Joe DeLeon, college football and draft analyst from the Believe Podcast Network, the First Team Pod, and also a former long snapper at Rhode Island. It's Joe DeLeon here. Dude, thank you for your time, dude. Love the breakdown. So good.
Of course. Thanks, guys.
There you go. All right, so how wild would that be? Both Oregon and Washington get in based on their resume being stronger than Texas based on the teams that they played.
Yeah, I thought it was unusual. He said Florida State's in if they stay undefeated. Yet when he listed the 4 teams, he didn't include Florida State in any of those scenarios.
Yeah, so one thing we do know, you don't want Alabama winning that SEC title game.
No, that's a problem.
The Pac-12 will get punked under those circumstances because if you have Alabama and Georgia with one loss, they're not going to drop Georgia from number 1 to out of the playoff. And Bama would certainly get in because they would
Come on, man, it's high five. You know me, I'm a favorite. It's got to be some sort of mistake. I mean, look at me. I'm an attractive hand giving a high.
Night. This is a tough one, I think, but I'm torn. I got a lot of possibilities.
You want to give one to the Godbrother for hanging with the cheap crowd last night at the wrestling event?
Nah. I think I'd rather give it to my nephew David for suffering through an entire wrestling card sitting next to me.
What I don't understand is that you got David set up with good seats, but why didn't it occur to you that you should take care of your brother? How'd the Godbrother get left out of that mix?
He can take care of himself. No, actually, I thought he was out of town, to tell you the truth. And he often is at this time of the year.
Yeah.
And so, and David, he's not as wealthy as his old man. So, and he likes to go to wrestling. My brother's kind of off and on the wrestling, so I'm never sure.
All right. That's an acceptable reason.
Well,
I was just curious.
That's the best I could come up with at short notice.
I just figured you didn't want Bruce bothering you the whole time.
No,
so.
Bruce never bothers me.
Okay.
Bruce he's a kick in the pants.
All right. Okay.
Literally, sometimes.
You notice how we got college football on? You're not paying attention to the NFL game on Prime right now? The wonderful Bears and Panthers game?
Well, we can't get it on that TV.
I know. I'm just asking if you're watching it on the computer.
No.
Not big points so far. Let's just put it that way. I don't want to say anything because Shacker will get mad at me.
Well, it's early in the game. You can give away a first quarter score.
No, I'm not going to do it. He'll get mad at me. I've irritated Shacker enough this week, so I'm gonna lay off. He's done a heck of a job. A lot of moving parts for Shacker this week.
Yes.
So I got to give him props for his efforts.
But he's sitting at home in the comfort of right next to the fireplace and the dog, and he's having a good time.
He's chilling. I'm just happy that there's only 2 Trailblazer games this week. It's made my life a little more decent.
It's nice, and you said this week, but really, there's really one, the Wednesday, and then the other one's not till Sunday, right? So
yeah, it's not really one. That's 2 because I have to come in and work on a Sunday, so I count that as 2.
Yeah.
And
I don't
4
count.
next week.
I
know
don't
you
count.
don't care.
I
Yeah.
don't count the weekend games because
All right.
we don't have a show those days. So,
all right. Big thanks to Joe DeLeon for joining the show. All of you for watching us and being a part of the YouTube stream. Thank you. Big thanks to Michael Shacker. We are back tomorrow.
let's do it again tomorrow, Chad.
We're going to be joined by the Grappler tomorrow.
Oh, gosh, Lynn Denton, my buddy.
The
Great.
Grappler will join us tomorrow, and we'll get ready for another weekend of college football.